We love the Canadian people. But the Canadian leadership threatening retaliatory tariffs against the United States, as President Trump often says, they just don't have the cards. There is no way that Canada can win a trade war with the United States.
What he's saying makes sense in my mind, and I think Americans think it makes sense. It means a rocky road for the rest of the world for a long time, obviously, but I think that it is going to be very interesting on April 2nd. I don't know if the effects are going to come in quick enough that Canadians will feel it before the election.
The effect on the Canadian economy is going to be far, far bigger than the effect on the American economy, but it will still affect the American economy. Look at the stock market in America and look at the inflation expectations. Trump's turning underwater from his approval rating, and so there's a lot of cracks forming.
The water, the electricity. If you're along the borders there is so much sharing that goes on, particularly North Dakota, Minnesota, so much trade that happens there that if you're these provinces that do business with these border states, they're going to be hit hard. And they're already, I'm sure, calling the White House going, lay off this because it's already affecting trade.
You can see how people's attitudes have changed towards America. If you look at, who we're willing to look at as trade partners, the appetite Canadians have for a greater and closer relationship with Europe, with the EU, has spiked in a dramatic way when it comes to things like trade, economic relations. I think that's the opportunity that Carney had seen, and that's why he spent that first week out there. He's understanding the tea leaves on this much deeper way than other Canadian politicians have.
You've been accused of allowing activism to bleed into your journalism.
If you actually watch my videos, I will present you with all the facts. I will also offer my own analysis so you know where I'm coming from. Because to me, I actually think that's more responsible. Rather than pretend to have a view from nowhere, I don't think that full neutrality and full objectivity exists. I'm going to give you all the facts. I'm going to tell you where I'm coming from. And then you can critically assess the information I'm giving you, the full range of information you need to draw your own conclusion. And then you can decide if you agree with me. I'm not just sitting there trashing people, but I'm also not going to sacrifice reality. There have been scholarly studies done, and I'm really sorry to say this, there is more disinformation shared on the right. Do you want me to pretend there isn't just so that people can feel good? If you're both siding issues, a sort of post-truth populism on the rise, if there's someone telling you that grass is pink and someone's telling you grass is green, media has gotten this wrong. They will sacrifice the avoidance of actual bias to avoid the perception of bias.
Reported inner turmoil within the conservative war room and among conservative pundits about whether or not Poilievre was talking enough about Donald Trump. There's a whole strain of conservative thought now, especially younger conservatives who say that Donald Trump is the concern largely of the boomer generation and older people who have time to think about and worry about Washington, not about their own lives. And so these younger folks are saying, listen, we're the generation that can't buy a house. We still have all the same complaints we had that when Justin Trudeau was in power. And now certainly Donald Trump complicates things and tariffs are going to hurt the economy. But even if tariffs go away, we're not really much better off.
Paul Chang reportedly telling a Chinese language media conference people should take Mr. Tay to the People's Republic of China consulate in Toronto and collect that $1 million reward. An RCMP investigation? That'll raise a few eyebrows.
What does it look like when there's a politics that's emerging from overseas that is impacting our democracy? And what do we do about that? So there is the Foreign Interference and Security of Information Act. That's a response to what we've seen as the rising tide of interference from bad actors overseas. The Liberals have a problem when it comes to maybe China, but Conservatives might also have a problem when it comes to India. And there's an overall problem with foreign interference, the way diaspora politics maybe is leveraged against other people in our Canadian democracy. And that's something we kind of have to figure out. This might seem like a very Ontario problem specific to the diversity of Markham Unionville to Don Valley North. But I think, when we see it, look at where people are settling in Canada, it's everywhere now, partially because of affordability issues, but it's everywhere. And so we have to think about how our communities are being harmed sometimes.
You're one of the authors of that well-known firewall letter. What do you make of Danielle Smith's ransom note to Mark Carney around a national unity crisis?
The firewall letter was something that Alberta could do that many other provinces in Canada were already doing. Quebec was out of the pension plan. We said we should be out of the pension plan. Other provinces had police forces. We said we should have police forces. So those were just things that Alberta could do without looking to the rest of the country. They were a way, in our view at the time, to make Alberta stronger within a stronger Canada. What Danielle Smith is doing today is holding a ransom note to the rest of the country. I have been particularly perplexed in the last couple of days of her taking a victory lap when we may have to shut down our auto industry in Ontario. And let me just say it this way. Danielle Smith is talking about auto workers in the way that she hates auto workers and other politicians talking about the oil and gas industry. give your head a shake, Danielle. This is a serious problem for our auto industry. And if you want people in the other parts of the country to care about the oil and gas industry, show a little compassion for the people in the auto industry who are not sure they're going to have a job in 6 months.
This is a relay project. Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
We're talking money in this episode of the show, Real Talkers. The big picture and the smaller picture, which is all of our biggest picture, if you will. That's our personal circumstances. We're going to kick things off with Marshall McAlister. We're looking for like a seasoned and wise sage sort of approach to what's happening in the markets. If you've been paying attention, talk of tariffs and, of course, even some what the President of the United States referred to as fake news, reports of perhaps pausing tariffs or Chinese developments in the relationship with American trading partners sent the markets into a free fall on Monday. They were calling it Manic Monday. They're calling it market mayhem. They're referencing Black Friday in 1929 as a comparable to the double-digit point loss. Now, the markets are bouncing back in some ways, but what is the average person supposed to make of all this? We figured we'd go there with somebody who knows what they're talking about. Marshall McAlister in just a minute. And then our regular Tuesday spot with Vicky Mochama. She's the host of Party All the Time, a new Canadian politics podcast that we're really proud to be collaborating with Vicky on. And, of course, we're checking in with her weekly through this election campaign as those stories developed. She did, like she told us she was going to do, her most recent episode on affordability, on mortgages, on housing costs. And for a lot of you, tariffs, believe it or not, or Canada's relationship with the United States is not your biggest election issue. There are millions of Canadians who are looking for leadership and smart policy from the major parties that really has nothing to do with Donald Trump, or at least very little. So we'll dig into that with Vicky Mochama before this episode is out. Marshall McAlister in 30 seconds, but first we want to let you know this episode is happening with the presenting sponsorship of Alberta's top online real estate school. You can find them online at relo.ca. That's where better real estate training starts. Real estate learning online for the bold and ambitious, and no matter where you're at in your career, they can help you find the next level. So maybe you're a seasoned realtor. Maybe you've been selling commercial real estate for a long time, or maybe you've been in the residential market for a long time and you're looking to broaden your horizons. You're looking to maybe expand your offerings to your clients. The best place to start is Relo. They've got the expert instructors to help you prepare to write your exam, to get licensed, and then to kick off your career on the right foot. And they're all about value, so that's why they've added a smorgasbord of extras to every course they offer, and they've bundled courses as well. The Alberta Commercial and the Alberta Residential Real Estate Bundle. With the promo code Ryan100, all one word, they'll knock $100 off when you get signed up. Remember, if you're kicking off your real estate career, do it with Relo.ca and use that promo code Ryan100 when you do. Well, the headlines today, I guess, tough to swallow for anybody, whether you're a casual investor, perhaps you're a retiree, somebody on a fixed income, or maybe you've just seen your net worth cut by 10 or 15% over the last while. It's unnerving to see headlines like this one at cbc.ca. The big head trade war, another day of stock market mayhem as nations ask Trump to reconsider tariffs. Meantime, the American president says he will not pause plans, and he's threatening China with another 50% levy. And markets everywhere, assets everywhere for that matter, are reflecting this uncertainty. Marshall McAlister leads the team at North Road Investment Counsel. And quite frankly, when I'm looking for somebody to make sense of what's happening around me, Marshall's the guy I tap on the shoulder. Good morning, Marshall. Thanks for making time for us. How are you sorting out everything that you're seeing right now? This is your wheelhouse. I think we've got you on mute right now, Marshall. We just want to make sure I can hear your voice before we get started. But do we have you there? Try it again. Johnny will get it sorted out with Marshall in just a quick second. In the meantime, Johnny, why don't we go to what we're hearing on Fox News right now? Maria Bartiromo, the Fox host, and keep in mind, again, this is a conservative cable news network using some of those words that folks have been avoiding for quite some time. So we're going to bring you comments from the left and the right today, from stateside and from right here in Canada. But this is what they were talking about on Fox News.
It is going to have an effect on Main Street. Some things will become higher priced. We will see some products actually be raised in price because companies will pass on the cost of tariffs to consumers. I would expect that. That's why you have some people saying that we could see a recession, we'll see a growth slowdown. This morning, Nancy Lazar, who I follow very closely, and I think she's terrific, from Piper Sandler, she says if the tariffs stay in place for at least the next 6 months, even if only 50% of the price shocks where we're seeing products go higher in price show through the economy, U.S. real GDP is on track to decline about 1% in the second quarter and in the third quarter, with unemployment rising. But look.
Okay, so they were hearing about it, recession, unemployment, markets are down. That's Maria Bartiromo on Fox. Marshall McAlister, leading the team at North Road Investment Counsel, joining us this morning. Marshall, how are you making sense of what you're seeing?
Let me just make sure that you can hear me this
time. You're loud and clear, buddy. You're loud and clear.
Well, it's been a very, very tumultuous couple of days in the capital markets. Yesterday, we're looking at the U.S. market at one time down almost 5%. And then later in that same trading day, up 3.5% to close the day at basically evening. So a number of weeks ago, we talked about the capital markets not being all that volatile with all of the tariff talks that Trump had been pushing on this world. Now we are seeing the volatility in a really, really big way.
So what do you think has changed from a few weeks ago to now? The tariff threat becoming a tariff reality? Is it that simple?
I think so. And I think it's also an indication that markets really work. These are now new opinions and new facts coming into the market, and prices are changing quickly with new information. And as far as like when we're looking at the kind of the health of capital markets, this is what we want to see in capital markets. We want to see prices change with new information. Even though we might not appreciate the direction of the price change, this is really how we can see a market that is functioning well.
Okay, so help us regular folks understand that. So I have very little experience. As a matter of fact, Marshall, you and I both know I have no experience in this realm. So this is why we want to look to you. But now, obviously, you're not going to be telling your clients, or you're not going to be telling anybody that if everything that you hold is dropping, that it's a good thing. But why does the market need to show this reflection? Like, why is the market as a barometer such an important thing?
Okay, so for every stock seller, there's a stock buyer. So as the prices are changing, and in like Monday's markets, prices are falling, somebody is taking new ownership of that position because they want to own that stock. So there can never be an orphan security. There's always going to be an owner of a security. So that new owner of that security needs to be compensated with a positive expected return for what they would expect into the future. And so when we're seeing the markets move in the way that they have over the last few days, we are seeing kind of a shift of who wants to own these securities, who can appreciate and expect a positive return, and who can actually hold on with the riskiness of these securities.
Okay.
Potentially the stock market is riskier now, and we are seeing just that.
Okay, so yeah, part of me is like listening to what you're saying. Part of me is wondering, is now a great time to buy? Like, people, you want to buy low and sell high, right? And now this is probably an overly simplistic way to look at it, but does this mark some opportunity for some people?
If you were a net buyer of financial assets, if you were a young saver in your working career, you want to be on the streets celebrating any market crash because you could be going out and buying securities at much lower prices than what you were buying in 2022 and 2023. This is good news for savers. Now, if you are retired, you are no longer working, you are no longer saving, this is going to be challenging for you because you're watching your net worth fall by 5% or 10%. So it does depend on your position within the saving spectrum on how you're going to appreciate or be frustrated with this market correction.
Now, no matter how experienced you are in what you do, I know that you can't predict like the week that all of this will bounce back, or what ultimately would fix all of this, or save everything, or return these stocks or these portfolios back to where people are used to seeing them or hope to see them. But what are you telling, let's say, for example, hypothetically, one of your clients comes to you, they're in the advanced stage of their life, they're in the autumn or the winter of their life, they're not working anymore, they have their retirement savings, this is the context, their portfolio, their nest egg is the context for how much they can travel, or whether or not they can buy the fifth wheel, or if they can take their kids on vacation this summer. What are you telling the people that are feeling, understandably, a little bit jittery right now?
Right on. So, Ryan, I think we got to understand why you would want to own businesses, publicly traded businesses in the first place. So, I am 48 years old, born in 1976. My lifetime, the rate of return in my lifetime of global stocks measured in Canadian dollars is just greater than 11%. That's compound. So that's been the reward for somebody owning securities over a really long time frame. Now, measured year by year, we're seeing about 20% of the observations are unknowing. You get negative returns by owning these types of securities. The other observations, you're getting positive returns. So if you can't own these types of investments for 5 years or 10 years and be patient through periods like we're going through this week, you should not be owning these securities at all. So one really, really important thing is just understand what you are owning, what returns you've seen historically, and 3, what has been the pain from owning these types of securities over the short term. And through understanding the returns, then that gives you a better opportunity to know what you want to own today.
I know you're going to want me to make clear that you're not going to be dishing out like financial management advice. People should not make drastic changes to their retirement savings today based on what they hear from you right now, I'm assuming. But there's a lot of people that are going to take a look at these headlines, like the American president says he will not pause plans, threatening China with another 50% levy. It doesn't look like any of this is going to be over anytime soon. And some people are probably wondering whether or not they should just jettison everything that's dropping right now, whether or not they should just sell, whether or not they should just get out of the market. Generally speaking, what would be your message to the person that's feeling wired that way today?
Yeah, generally, you're probably not wanting to get out of markets today. And if you are going to be owning investments for 5 and 10 years and longer, these are investments that you should own in your portfolio. They can be fantastic sources of growth for your long-term savings. But it's really important to know what you own and know why you own it. And if there's things that you can do to expand the diversification of your portfolio, if there's things that you can do to lower the costs of your portfolio, these are things that you can do to give yourself a better chance of having a better investment outcome. Now might be a great time to reevaluate your portfolio, especially if you're looking at lower values. It doesn't mean you're selling out of everything. It maybe now is a great time to just shift and change your approach, especially if that approach is going to make the portfolio more diversified and have lower costs.
You're certainly in an interesting line of work as a professional money manager, where it's your job to obviously provide the best returns you possibly can for your clients, and to a certain degree, that sometimes means, to put it into sports language, you got to pick the winners, right? And so I guess for a lot of people, they're going, well, I got to find a professional money manager that can pick the stocks that aren't as susceptible or aren't as vulnerable to dropping here, the stocks that have a better potential to bounce back or to boom. I'd be curious for your insight on that.
I think that's a common misconception about the professional side of the finance industry. The likelihood that any individual or any organization can find one manager, one team that is able to pick securities in such a way to constantly outperform markets, it's next to impossible. If we look at the research that comes at us every year, and we look at manager rate of return next to benchmark rates of returns, there's always going to be a small subset of managers that have better performance than the benchmark or the average. but it's musical chairs. Those managers don't constantly stay in like the outperforming positions. Something that I learned really early on in my university years was the markets are really competitive, and it's really difficult to have one manager that's able to beat markets all the time. We just don't see it. So in our professional life, we steer our clients towards recognizing that one, markets are really, really competitive, and in a competitive market, just take advantage of that competition and then let markets do all the hard work for you by like sorting out all the prices that need to change throughout time, and have massively diversified portfolios to take advantage of the rate of return of that market. As I was saying earlier in our conversation, that 11% rate of return in my lifetime didn't come through an active manager buying and selling stocks. It was just the stocks measured through indexes throughout my lifetime. And that's been the rate of return of just the average.
I appreciate you guys talking about a steady hand and a studied voice guiding through wealth and investing on your website at northroadic.com. That's kind of the perspective we were looking for today because, like I said, Marshall, I mean, these are real headlines. I'm pulling these out. I'm not making these up. Manic Monday, market mayhem. I mean, a lot of people are feeling like their hearts are in their throats right now, and a lot of people that probably wouldn't even go far enough to describe how they're feeling. So I appreciate your perspective on this. Thanks for making time for us, Marshall.
You're welcome, Ryan. Have a good morning.
Yeah, you as well. That's Marshall McAlister. Marshall leads the team over at North Road Investment Counsel. Obviously, wonderful friends of Real Talk, and you can learn more by checking them out on the sponsors tab on the website. I see a bunch of different takes on our live chat right now, powered by Park Power, talking about exactly how you're understanding or basically how you're processing what you're seeing around you. That these numbers were wild, and it's not just the markets. I mean, it's assets in general. Like gold is down, even crypto, Bitcoin is down. Like pretty much everything is down right now. I thought it was particularly interesting to hear Elon Musk speaking to this, at least to a certain degree, talking about Tesla, talking about SpaceX, and in particular, specifically referencing what he's hoping to see. I mean, technically, this guy's, in charge of DOGE, right? This Department of Government Efficiency, and for a lot of folks, he's the president's number one advisor. I mean, it's pretty obvious the relationship that Donald Trump and Elon Musk have had, at least in the early stages of that presidency. And that's why I thought that this take right here is particularly noteworthy. Here's Elon Musk just hours ago.
I hope that I hope that the United States and Europe can establish a very close partnership. We obviously are, there's an alliance already, but I'm hopeful that there can be a very close relationship with America and Europe. And I'm hopeful, for example, with the tariffs, that at the end of the day, I hope it is agreed that both Europe and the United States should move, ideally, in my view, to a zero tariff situation, effectively creating a free trade zone between Europe and North America. That would be that's what I hope occurs.
So that's Elon Musk calling for a zero tariff situation, in particular talking about Europe and the United States. But you wonder if he'll be bending the ear of President Trump on that one. I think for a lot of people that are hoping to see the tariff situation resolved, Elon Musk would probably be the number one voice that you'd hope would be in Trump's ear on this. But will it move the needle? Who knows? Tough to say. Senator Mark Kelly, obviously has served Americans in a military context. A Democratic senator out of Arizona was basically spitting fire about the trillions of dollars lost on the stock market. Here's what he pushed out on his social media as this was all happening mid-Monday afternoon.
Hey folks, it's Mark Kelly, and I'm sitting by a tree here on the Mall in Washington, watching a lot of unhappy people go by protesting this administration and the dumb things they are doing. Like raising tariffs on all these countries, which is a big tax hike for American families. And the result of that is a stock market that is incredibly volatile. And Donald Trump has destroyed trillions and trillions of dollars of wealth. He is, I think without a doubt now, the person who has ever lived on this planet that has destroyed more money more quickly. I'm sure he wins on speed and also the amount he managed to destroy here. Trillions and trillions of dollars gone from people's 401ks, or maybe it was money they were trying to save to put a down payment on a house because they're a young family. This is not the way to run a government, not the way you should run an economy. Who says this is a good idea? Donald Trump. And people that work directly for Donald Trump, they think this is brilliant. They think the boom is coming. Well, I'll tell you what, if he doesn't unravel these tariffs soon, this is not likely to end well.
So that's obviously a political opponent of President Trump. That's Senator Mark Kelly out of Arizona. I see Super Chat Ken in our live chat says, I told Costco yesterday I was putting a 40% tariff on them because I buy so much from them and they're not buying anything from me. Hopefully Ken and Costco can get that sorted out. Plain Power in our chat, powered by Park Power, wondering what is the whole purpose of all these trade barriers? Like, for real? Why? Yeah, I guess that's what everybody's trying to figure out, right? I mean, the short answer is that Donald Trump's trying to make America great again. That's what he's telling the American people. And he believes that this is the way to do it. He thinks that America is mired in bad trade agreements. He's wondering who the idiot is that dreamed up and signed the trade agreement with Canada and Mexico. Of course, we all know who that is, right? It was him. But he's trying to get a better deal with China. He's trying to get a better deal with Vietnam. He's trying to get a better deal from islands where only penguins live. And then you and I were having an interesting conversation yesterday, Johnny. What if you're the CEO of Nike? Or what if you're the CEO or you're on the board of some major clothing manufacturers that, let's say, do hundreds of millions or billions of dollars of business, let's say in Vietnam as an example, or somewhere else where 40% tariffs or 30% tariffs are being slapped on your products. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, who's going to pay more for those? It's going to be American consumers.
Yeah, all of us. I think the Chinese tariffs scare me the most because I think people have this big boogeyman feeling about China, which is fair. You know, they've got a huge population. There's a lot of pollution going on. There's a lot of other things in regards to worries about, you know, how they manufacture things. But the bottom line is you go around your house right now. I could go into anyone's house listening to this, watching on our 7 streaming platforms right now, and I could point at probably 80% of the things you have in your home that are either manufactured, have pieces or elements inside them that are produced in China, you know?
Costs are going to be going up for everybody, and you're hearing that regardless of what the source is on cable news, whether it's Fox or MSNBC or CNN or whatever else. You're hearing it because it's a fact and because you can't hide that from American consumers, right? Jillian in the chat says, I hate when we're giving credit to people who are doing awful things 99% of the time. She says Elon Musk is 100% responsible for this. He's been the enabler in chief. Others of you are saying that Elon's been fighting against tariffs, calling for 0% the entire time. I'm grateful to hear, though, that Super Chat Ken has been able to sort it out with Costco. Congratulations, Ken. He follows up, says, when I go to spend $100, I'm only going to walk out with $300 instead of $400 of stuff in my cart. That from Ken. I'm glad you're able to sort it out. Kind of an interesting development in our live chat this morning as well. Sounds like we have a number of real talkers that were at the big Pierre Poilievre rally in Nisku last night. You heard about this? This was kind of an interesting one. They're saying, and I guess there was some issue with, was it CPAC, I think, that was supposed to be broadcasting it, but they had a trouble with the signal. It was in a big warehouse in Nisku, which is just right by the airport. CBC's got it, though, so we can show you here. This is kind of interesting to see the former Prime Minister of Canada, Stephen Harper, there to not just introduce and speak on behalf of Pierre Poilievre, but to endorse him as well. And you may go, well, yeah, obviously, Conservative Prime Minister, obviously endorsing the Conservative candidate, but no, not necessarily. Stephen Harper did not do this for Andrew Scheer. He did not do this for Aaron O'Toole. So it's kind of interesting. He says he's known Pierre for 25 years. Of course, obviously, Pierre Poilievre was an MP and served under Stephen Harper for a number of years as a relatively young MP. Harper says he's known him for 25 years. And he says that he has the political experience that has given Harper the confidence to endorse him without hesitation. Says he's a better candidate than Mark Carney. He kind of took a couple shots at Carney last night.
Yeah, I heard.
In particular, he goes, so I hear that he's, Canada I don't want to say emerging unscathed from the real issues in 2008, 2009. Everybody remembers that, most especially in the United States, but it was felt all around the world. And Canada, I think, was recognized for having an economy that, for the most part, emerged from that in a healthier fashion than some of the other G7 countries. And Stephen Harper took a shot at Mark Carney last night, saying, "I heard that he's trying to take credit for this," and he kind of smirked. Of course, at that time, Stephen Harper would have been wanting to take the credit for that, having navigated Canada through those years.
Of course he would have. And speaking of taking shots, I don't want to take shots at tech guys because I know their jobs are hard, but this shaky camera shot the whole time just bothered the hell out of me, Ryan. If you're watching on YouTube, it's just, I assume that you can tell it's a rowdy crowd. Probably this camera was on like a stage or a piece of flooring that was kind of, getting rattled around.
It was for sure on
and then the mic thing was just like, I was like, hire me for these things. You gotta do a pre-stream before and check everything, right?
You know what? I think that in a situation like that, and we've been there before, it's almost
live.
Like it's not a great problem to have because you want to have the rally broadcast to as many people as possible.
Of course, yeah.
And if you're Pierre Poilievre, like we spent some time talking about this yesterday, who is putting his neck out there and talking about crowd sizes, which, Max Fawcett gave us his take on that. Obviously, Max, I don't know how Max is voting, but my guess is he's not voting for, I don't think he's voting for Pierre Poilievre.
I think we can take
I don't think so. Yeah. But Max saying yesterday, like, if you're trying to distance yourself from Donald Trump and then you're sitting there boasting about crowd sizes, it's kind of a risky move. Like, comms advisors would likely advise against. However, you don't have to boast about your crowd sizes if there's video everywhere of massive crowds.
Yeah, be humble about it.
So you don't have to say anything. Yeah. So that's why obviously Pierre Poilievre would want as much video, as many photos as possible of what they're estimating. And who knows? I wasn't there. Real Talkers in the chat, let us know. I see Tommy Tempers in the chat today. He says he was there. Says it was epic. But I've heard people saying there was like 12, maybe 13, maybe 15,000 people there.
Sure,
that's a hell of a lot of people to fit into a warehouse. And so the visuals there are astounding. And some critics will say, you can draw a bunch of people you can draw a bunch of conservatives to Nisku. Congratulations. I think that if you can draw 15,000 people anywhere for something, it's noteworthy.
Of course.
Now, whether or not it matters that Pierre Poilievre can still draw, and I say this respectfully to other candidates in Leduc and Beaumont and Nisku and South Edmonton, Wetaskiwin, but Mike Lake, the Conservative MP, one of the Conservative MPs in that part of the province, typically wins, and Mike's been on the show before, typically wins with one of the largest margins of victory in the country. Like, typically, Conservative MPs just south of Edmonton or in the south of Edmonton are winning with like 70% of the vote-ish. So, this is definitely their territory. Now, if Pierre Poilievre can draw a crowd like that in downtown Toronto, or if he draws a crowd like that in Vancouver, I know in the interior of BC he can. If he can draw a crowd like that on Vancouver Island, then I think people will really pay attention. But still, I do think it is significant to get the Prime Minister out, to get Stephen Harper out, and to draw that many people. If you were there... if you were there and you want to send us a note, maybe not in the live chat right now because it is humming right now. The live chat is banging right now. We're doing our best to stay on top of it and read your comments. You can always send us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com.
Yeah, do these numbers translate to the polls, though? That's the thing, because it's all fine and good, and it's great to boast about crowd size, but we all know how that can, backfire on you. I mean, Kamala Harris had insane rallies as well, and she lost the presidential election in the States. So, but I agree with you. If we start seeing these numbers in Ontario, in Toronto, in downtown Vancouver, then we really, really, really know. I mean, who knows what's going to happen here? I mean, months ago we thought Pierre had this thing on lock. Now it's looking closer. I don't know. I'll ask you right now.
Neck and neck.
And
right
I know we hate to do this, and Max did it yesterday on the show. But what do you think if today? We went to the polls tomorrow. What do you think the outcome of the election is? I'll go first.
Geez.
I'll go first. I think, and people are going to be surprised that I say this, but I think conservative minority.
Conservative minority.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, why don't we, let's put this up here. This is CTV News. This is Nanos tracking. Johnny, you've got the image.
Oh, this one?
Yeah, this one here. Thanks, buddy. That's Nanos polling for CTV and the Globe and Mail. Okay. This is tracking from April 5th to 7th. So this is as recent as it gets, with about 1,256 Canadians polled. So take the polls for what they're worth, but they're always an interesting peek into how things are going. For the benefit of those on the podcast, we'll let you know that the Liberals are polling at around ballot support ending April 7th at just under 43%, so 42.7%. That's a 3-day change down by about 3 points. Again, the election in about 3 weeks from now, okay? The Conservatives are about 5 points behind them, 38.1. Let's call it 4.5 points behind, with a 3 and change point rise over the past 3 days. So that's interesting. So the Liberals bump down a few points. The Conservatives bump up by basically the exact same margin. And then again, everybody else under 10%. You got the NDs at 8%, which if you're Jagmeet Singh, that's an absolutely devastating number. The Bloc Québécois just about 7%. The Greens at like 3%. And Max Bernier just can't move the needle. And I'm not even trying to be funny or be an asshole or anything.
But it's
just like 1.4%.
It's just deadlock.
I think it just goes to show, quite frankly, what that means is that like ardent conservatives, and if you want to call them like the right-wing conservatives, I just don't think they want to take any chances right now.
100%.
And I think here's my thing, if Pierre Poilievre was still experiencing, to borrow a phrase from Justin Trudeau, if he was experiencing the numbers that he was like a year ago, then I bet you, what's that thing about like a high tide rising all boats?
Oh, yeah.
Like I bet you that the PPC would be polling better as well.
Course.
Because maybe there'd be more right-wingers that would feel like they could move their vote around to Max, maybe try to get Max in the House of Commons, or maybe another one of their candidates. I don't know.
I'm glad you brought that up.
But right now, I don't think they want to mess around.
No, I don't think anyone does. And I also think that these NDP numbers, like, it's scary for them right now. I think a lot of those, not a lot, but I think you're going to see that number lower when we go to the polls, because I think some people who've already decided they're going to flip from NDP and vote Liberal because of that, just to be sure that Pierre doesn't win and the Conservatives don't take hold in these ridings. And I also think, like, is it not scary? Like, do they even survive as a party after this, Ryan, if that happens?
Who, the PPC?
The NDP.
Oh, the NDP.
Like, what do you need to maintain status?
I mean, 12 seats is official party status, right?
So,
but I think that, it'll obviously trigger a leadership race, but that's not exclusive to the NDP. Like if Pierre Poilievre loses this election, I would imagine
he's probably gone too.
I would imagine like what's been the fate of the previous 3 conservative leaders that lost elections.
But
right?
Pierre is
Harper
a voice
resigned,
you
the
don't
other
want
two
to.
resigned.
Yeah, Pierre is a voice you don't want to lose, I would think. He's done so much to bolster that side of the aisle, right?
He sure has, and also at the same time, people will look to. I mean, I think back to what Peter MacKay said. Well, like the former conservative leader, obviously federally, before they merged with Stephen Harper. Everybody remembers that, and ultimately formed government. Remember, he comes out of the mist. Nobody's heard from Peter MacKay in a while. He comes out of the mist and he accuses the Conservatives of
out of the bush,
yeah,
like Homer.
Out of the bush. Remember with his gum boots when Belinda Stronach dumped him, and he did that media interview. It's not funny when somebody gets dumped and gets their heart broken, but like remember he was like walking with his dog and he was all sad. But nobody had heard from him for a while, and then he accused the Conservatives of missing on an empty net, and that was kind of that call from inside the House. I think it resonated and probably stung and maybe was fair. So, I think that Pierre Poilievre has anyway. Whatever, we're getting ahead of ourselves. He hasn't lost the election.
No, but we're projecting.
I would say when any party loses an election, unless you feel like your leader was just installed and maybe had no chance, or there's some other extenuating circumstance, I think that typically that leader's tenure is for all intents and purposes probably done.
Yeah. Welcome to Goose, he a new member, a real talker.
Attaboy,
Don't
Goose.
forget you can sign up for memberships right now with all the perks, including our members only live chat on Discord. Head over to our YouTube homepage, and there's a new, right next to the subscribe button, there is join. A lot of people in here giving their thoughts on whether it's going to be liberal minority, minority, conservative majority. Maybe I should just run a poll on YouTube when we go to these ads and see what people think.
I like that. Yeah, let's do that. Before we do, I also, and we got Vicky Mochama. She's just, we're going to give you guys a heads up. We're actually talking to Vicky. She's in Italy right now, which is super cool. Milan. And we're grateful that she's working with the time difference and everything with us. So Vicky Mochama coming up in just a moment. But we did also play a clip. If you listen to our episode on, I always know what day of the week it is, but rarely the date. It is the 8th as we're speaking to you.
Today is the 8th
of April,
Ryan.
which means on the 7th of April, we played a clip of Mark Carney taking a swipe at Danielle Smith, right? And he was talking about Canadian politicians that have been down in the United States, and Danielle Smith responded to it.
She
and
sure
I thought,
did.
hey, fair is fair. And Carney took a swipe, and he was basically talking about, he says, we're doing this, and we're, fighting for Canada, and we're negotiating with the Americans. And he says, and that's why Doug Ford's been going down there. And the crowd kind of cheers. And number one, I was kind of interested in it because I'm like, that's a liberal Prime Minister talking about a conservative premier. Interesting. But I also know that most people believe that Doug Ford is probably more liberal than conservative anyway. Send me your comments and hate mail if you so choose to our various social media platforms, but not so surprising. And then Carney continues as he has the crowd chuckling, and he goes, and then maybe we'll send Danielle next. And then he goes, no. And then everyone laughs. And then he goes, maybe no. Maybe we won't send Danielle. And we were kind of musing about it. Like, did Carney take a risk? Was this a positive for him to show a candid side? Like, what do you all make of this? Well, nobody, myself included, is surprised to see the Premier of Alberta respond. And so obviously, as she was granting interviews a number of hours after the Liberal leader said that, this is what Alberta's Premier had to say.
A joke during the campaign.
Well, I've noticed this with progressive men, how much they talk about how much they support women until they meet a strong conservative woman. And so this is a pretty consistent type of approach that I've seen, not only from the current Prime Minister, but the former one as well. And the attitude is, sit down and shut up. Well, I don't shut up. I make sure that Albertans know exactly how I feel about issues, and I'm going to continue advocating on behalf of my province, whether he likes it or not.
So that's Alberta's Premier. She's not going to shut up.
Well, no surprises there, right?
Continue advocating whether he likes it or not. Mm-hmm. I think that this serves Carney well, and I think that this serves Danielle Smith well.
Yeah, I
think it serves both of them well, but you know who it might not serve well is Pierre Poilievre.
That's true. But, I've been listening, on all media platforms, how they're talking about this. And some people are like, I hate the tit for tat. Some people are like, let's go. I love the tit for tat. I like a little bit of this. And like we discussed on the show yesterday, I like how Carney's kind of swinging back, and I felt like his was a little softer. Like he's laughing and smiling and talking about Danielle Smith and Ford and sending them down to the States and all this stuff, and it's funny. But I don't mind that back and forth, and I wasn't surprised by that clip at all. That's what Danielle's doing. She's standing up for the province and believes in that, and that's what she's always been doing. I don't think that's going to change. And I also make a prediction that as we get closer to the election, she will be dropping bigger bombs on Carney for sure.
Yeah, we shall see how it all goes. We'll get to more in our live chat powered by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider, in just a little bit. We've got a lot more politics to talk, including affordability and housing, and really the bottom line. Like, are we inching toward it? I want to be careful when I use this word, friends. I'm not throwing it around flippantly. It's why we had Marshall on this morning. Are we approaching the Great Recession? As people are talking, we'll get into housing and affordability and, of course, the campaign. Less than 3 weeks out from Election Day in just a moment. First, I want to put North Road Investment Counsel back on your radar right now. You heard from Marshall today. Marshall and his team, Marshall Carey and the rest of the team at North Road Investment Counsel, a steady hand and studied voice to guide you through wealth and investing. You got a sense how Marshall's wired today and how he approaches professional money management. It's obvious that life's financial journey doesn't always follow a straight path, but that's why their team partners with discerning families, foundations, and associations on the winding path with expert navigation through the complexities of wealth accumulation and investment advisory services for clients in Alberta and across the country. Now, what makes them different? Their expertise as financial planners ensures they focus on the destination. And that is accomplished through 4 different service business units. Investment Counsel, which we talk a lot about, financial planning, insurance, But I want to make sure you know about their digital risk advisory services. Nobody else in the space is doing this. They have a teammate specifically and only assigned to work with their partners on digital risk advice. You can take the digital risk today. Might change your life. Make sure your wealth is secured, your family's future on the right path with North Road Investment Counsel. We're talking a lot about how grateful we are for our friends at Park Power powering this live chat that brings so many different perspectives to the table. And Park Power wants you to know what's happening right now with specific offerings and an exclusive perk for Real Talk viewers and listeners. If you go to parkpower.ca/Real Talk, you can learn more about the promo codes they have, including if you're going to bundle internet, electricity, and natural gas. Park Power offering low rates, awesome services, and profits shared with Alberta charities, which Johnny and I really, really love. I heard from Chris Kozowski, the CEO at Park Power, yesterday. I made a mistake on the show, and I owe everybody an apology.
What?
Yeah, well, I was letting everybody know that Park Power is currently offering the lowest fixed electricity rate in the province. That part is true. And I let you know that it was 6.69 cents per kilowatt hour. He goes, Jespo, no. He says it's down to 6.5 cents per kilowatt hour. It's dropped again. Still the lowest fixed electricity rate in Alberta, exclusively with Park Power.
Nice.
Check out parkpower.ca/Real Talk today. And a big shout out to our friends at California Closets. I saw they just had a team meeting. They got all their team members together, all rocking their Canadian hockey jerseys, and some of them custom, the new ones with Never 51 on the back. A shout out to them. Our friends at California Closets, from the beginning, Canadian owned and operated, building and installing the best custom closets and storage solutions for the entire home. Make the most of your space with their custom organizational systems. It all starts with a free design consultation. You can book that consultation today and also browse their installations. Nobody does it like they do. It all comes with a lifetime guarantee at californiaclosets.ca.
Kind of have been thinking more about owning my own place. And so I thought I'd look up what kind of mortgage I could get. And I want you to join me in the journey. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're seeing me look at the mortgage affordability calculator from a bank. And it asks, how much can you afford? So I'm going to put in my total gross annual household income. I'm going to put it at a nice, healthy estimate of $75,000. And then let's say I put together like $20,000 living in Ontario, which is probably like my first mistake. And it also asks for what kind of loans and other debts you pay per month. So let's say I spend like, $500 a month on some of these debts. And then my total owing on my credit cards and line of credit, I'm going to put in the number 5,000. Let's go with that. I still have yieldy student loans. So I am still paying for things. I don't have any condo fees, lucky me, but I'm going to hit calculate. And it gives me an affordability estimate of, $246,000 is the maximum purchase price I can get. And I would have a monthly mortgage payment of about $1,280. I'm frankly surprised because when I did this hours ago, it was telling me like, you have $20,000. That's as much as you can get. You have the cash you have, and that's all you can take with you. But for $246,000, I could get like a decent 2-bedroom something in like Lethbridge, Alberta. That wouldn't be too bad. Or I could buy like a parking lot in downtown Toronto. But not bad options either way.
She's the host of the wildly popular Canadian political podcast Party All the Time, and she joins us now from Milan, Italy. Vicky Mochama, what are you doing in Milan, Italy?
I've come to see what affordable housing looks like.
Yeah,
I've come to uncover the future.
Milan's got to have some of the most expensive housing in the world, does it?
No, like a lot of Italian places, there's all this incredible post-war building. Like a lot of places around the world, it's facing a lot of pressure from population changes. But you can get a decent-sized apartment, like a 1-bedroom. I'm currently staying at a friend's apartment, and they don't pay the way a lot of Canadians are paying, which is like a huge chunk of their paychecks. Like a student can afford to live in a place like Milan, which is fashion capital. It's a business capital. It's a busy city. and you can still get a good place to live.
Wow, you're never coming back. This is
No.
Now that we've lost you to Milan. The good news is gig economy, Zoom. You've got good internet. Clear. You can do whatever you need to do from Milan. So you may have found your home. I love this. So your whole recent episode, Party All the Time, which people can get on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever they get their podcasts, is all about this: mortgages and housing, and the fact that for probably millions of Canadians, despite all the talk about Donald Trump, this is their number one election issue.
Well, we've got two big money stories essentially competing for attention here. You have what's happening with tariffs and the markets, and that's big kind of, it doesn't feel like it hits your pocketbook. But I wanted to talk about what are the issues that people are dealing with day to day? And we know, the calculations, people are spending anywhere between upwards of 50% of their income on rent. People are having difficulty accessing a mortgage based on the thresholds that we have in this country. And it is just very difficult to afford a house, whether you rent or you buy. And so we wanted to get into it with some really cool people talking about like the challenge of what rent does in a federal political landscape when rent is a provincial issue, and why some of the parties are beginning to talk about housing affordability and some of the proposals and ideas that they put forward.
Yeah, have you seen, there have been, we've done a bit of a dive into it on what Mark Carney said about it, what Pierre Poilievre has said about it, with apologies to Jagmeet Singh's NDP and everybody else, coverage on this election has really been on those two big main platforms. Is there one that's kind of established itself, or that your guests in your most recent episode thought has established itself as more credible, more doable from the party that's had the power to do something over the last 10 years, or the party that says it wants the power to do something over at least the next 4 or 5?
Well, you have the kind of appeal to going back in time to when the federal government was a builder of homes. They built apartments during the wartime era. They created a kind of base of affordability for people during a very kind of fraught and risky time. And that's the Mark Carney proposal, where he wants to build or create basically a national homes developer who's going to double the rate of housing that we currently build. And in this country, we need not just like tens of thousands of housing units, we need millions, so almost close to 10 million, in order to get back to a rate of affordability that is livable for people. And that would be like going all the way back to 2004. And so we talk a little bit about that. Like, what does it mean for the federal government to want to get back into housing? And is that something that people want them to do? The conservative pitch is a bit different, where they're trying to say we can ease the difficulties and challenges of buying a housing by doing things like getting rid of the GST tax on home purchases. That's a different approach. That's not saying we're going to build the homes. We're going to incentivize the building of homes and the purchasing of homes and make it a bit more affordable and accessible for you. So these are two very different strategies tackling the same problem. And it's a meaty problem for Canadians. There's a recent survey from Wealthsimple saying that the two major cost of living crises for Canadians are the cost of housing and the cost of food and affordable items like transit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a very salient issue. And I think that the parties, and we can talk about, some of the approaches, like even the NDP and the Liberals have about using federal land as a place to build things like co-ops and trusts. That's more the NDP idea. The Liberal idea is to use federal land to just simply build some housing and create affordable units that would kind of buttress the market. That would be an option. And so I think these are all competing ideas in a certain way. They're not necessarily aimed, they're not on the same rail. They're not on the same track. There's some agreement. There's some agreement on things like lowering the taxation burden on buying a new home. But when it comes to sort of big pitches, it's the federal Liberals who are pitching a big return to sort of the wartime era housing.
Yeah. Not surprising to hear you say that, the majority of Canadians that are living and really feeling this affordability crisis are feeling it most on their housing and their groceries. It's like, what are the two things that you can't avoid no matter what, right? Like, imagine how many people, and not just limited to Canada, but certainly our fellow Canadians that have canceled family vacations, or the kids maybe aren't going to be in soccer this summer, or they've already, you remember the Chrystia Freeland thing, like they've canceled their Disney Plus and their Netflix and their Amazon, right? Some of them have probably gone from 2 cars to 1 or 1 to none. Or they've got a car sitting in the driveway that's maybe not even insured anymore because they can't afford to put gas in it. Like, people have been making tough decisions on a lot of things in their household for a long time. And now is the first time in a while, I guess, that people get to go to the polls and put their X next to whoever they think is going to best not just get their own family out of this one, but get the entire economy out of it as well, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of this is about communities, right? Like if your neighbor beside you is struggling to afford the home that they have, that's going to have an impact on you too. That it touches a lot of communities very closely, especially in places where you're looking at younger people who are doing a bit of a crossover between renting and buying, and they're trying to figure out where they can afford to live, where they can get around. These issues are so deeply held for people, and they want to hear solutions from the government addressing them. Now, some of these are like big long-term investments, like we see currently with the federal Liberals childcare program, that we won't necessarily see the data and the benefit and fruition of for 3 to 5 years to 10 years. And so it's hard to kind of sell people on like the federal government's going to build a home in your community. Okay, well, you may not be the one to purchase that one. You may not be the one to reside in it. But the idea is that it's supposed to be a net benefit to you. Or that, the sort of GST tax pitch, that's a bit more immediate. That's lowering the cost of accessing housing for you. And so these are like interesting competing ideas. There's something kind of interesting to me about the fact that they're talking now increasingly about the day-to-day of people's reality. You have the NDP, once again, bless their hearts, they're not necessarily one or two in this race, talking about tying federal money to policies like rent control. So not only are we building, or would the federal government be building housing, but ensuring that those rent prices don't suddenly jack all the way up. I'm in Milan right now, but I just came from Vienna. Vienna is an interesting place. It's the world's most livable city time after time after time. And the main reason for that is that the federal government owns something like, or the city government owns something like 69% of the housing stock. They are the number one landlord, whether somebody is renting or they're in a sort of more cooperative model. And it is housing day after day after day. Everyone I talked to in Vienna, they were like, if I couldn't afford to live here, this place wouldn't be as great as it is. Now, they have some things that allow them to do that, like the UN is a major business there, and so that provides a certain level of industry stability. But at the same time, you can't kind of look at a place like Vienna or even cities like Milan without noting that housing is kind of the reason why people can afford to live the way that they do, why they have access to services, why they are able to afford to take bigger risks, why they can send their kids further afield. The housing is such a salient issue for people because, like you said, it's the thing you do every day. You got to live somewhere.
Yeah, we have my brother lives in downtown Vancouver, wife, 2 little kids, in the same place that he's rented for what? I'll do the math. For literally 25 years, for like 24 years. He's lived there for 24 years. And I said to him, I was like, I'm so, I'm grateful, like with the cost of living, and he and his wife are professional theater actors, and they have other work as well. But like, they're like an average income Vancouver family. And I just, I said, I'm just so grateful you guys have a place you can afford. He goes, dude, the only reason we can afford it is because they got in like 24 years ago, and the rent can only go up. I'm not sure what it is. I think it's like 1.5 or 2% a year. And like every year, like clockwork, it goes up by 1.5 or 2%. But it's by definition, a rent controlled space. And that's the reality in that jurisdiction. Here in Alberta, as far as I know, no Alberta community has any rent. Have you ever heard of one, Johnny? I don't think so. I don't think any Alberta community has.
No.
As far as I know, no. Vicky, I might be wrong. A real talker will correct us if I'm wrong. That's for sure. You're in and around Toronto, in Ontario. Are the rent controls in Toronto? Is that something that's been in place for a long time?
There's a bit of a kind of complex policy, which is to say that houses built before a certain time are subject to rent control, but anything built after that, which is when the vast I think it's, I don't want to get the date wrong, but I think it's like 2001 or something like that. That's when the vast majority of Toronto and Ontario housing was built, especially when you're looking at condominiums or tower buildings. Anything built after that point in time is not subject to rent control, and those prices can be jacked up. I have friends who 1 year during the pandemic got a very decent, affordable rent for 2 people who make just shy of 6 figures, and the next year that rent doubled, just absolutely doubled, and it doubled across the whole building. So that's kind of what happens when you have just a kind of pure corporate system and there aren't a lot of laws. But as you're talking, it's different from province to province to province. And the federal government's levers aren't that big when it comes to rent, but they're massive when it comes to housing and funding housing and using the power of their purchasing money to convince municipalities to do different things. And so we've seen the Liberals kind of chip away at that. Sean Fraser was like the minister famous for like, he'd send a letter to every city council saying like, build this house, build this unit, build these types of housing, and we as a federal government will find a way to support your project. And they're saying now we can make that a much more comprehensive policy and program. And the NDP are saying a similar thing, but we're not hearing as much of like, we're going to get into the nitty gritty of building housing from the Conservatives.
Yeah, and that's kind of like antithetical to the whole Conservative perspective, right? That you would establish. I mean, look no further than this. Here's Jesse Klein's feature. This is from about a week ago in the National Post. Mark Carney's 5-year plan for Soviet-style housing, and that the comparison resonates on a number of different levels, including the fact that the state would be involved. Also, the design. Poilievre poking fun at the plan, saying the houses don't even have, what was it? They don't even have driveways, I think was the concern that he had, or there weren't parking spaces. So different theories, but you'd be hard-pressed, I think, to find like a legit Conservative Party platform that would suggest that it should be some nationalized public agency that she should be building all this. I personally don't think it's a great plan either. This is for my 2 cents or for whatever it's worth. I think there's a huge opportunity to work with developers, construction companies, Canadian sole proprietors, and other skilled operators that are ready for the work that just need to see some, even if it's just some confidence in the investment or what you might describe even as like a loan guarantee, however you want to roll it out or whatever you want to call it. There's certainly an opportunity. Canada has the skilled labor. And with tariffs at play, we probably have more lumber than we've had access to for the first time in a long time as well, coming out of BC and other areas. So, I don't know if anybody would expect to see the Conservatives coming up with a big publicly administered plan. Poilievre would get pounced on for that one.
Yeah, I think it's like fully antithetical to Conservative values, the idea of building a whole new government bureaucracy that then owns all these assets nationally, especially in our market economy. I don't see a lot of Conservatives being swayed by that kind of thinking. But at the same time, it's one of in this election that hasn't been big on kind of big vision thinking, as Katie O'Malley pointed out in episode 1 of the podcast. There hasn't been kind of like a big pitch of like, I think Canada First is a bit of a big vision idea, but there haven't been any programs or policies that kind of go along with it. There have been more technocratic changes, smaller ideas that are meant to kind of target cost of living issues. But at the same time, I think this is probably one of the sort of like bigger appeals that we're seeing from any of the parties, including the NDP and the Liberals, who are a bit in lockstep when it comes to this. The only other place where there's almost no daylight between the parties is on the taxation. And getting rid of or minimizing the GST tax on new homes. And so, these can feel a bit wonky, but I think what the Carney Liberals are trying to do is appeal to people's idea of a big vision for Canada when it comes to housing affordability.
Sure. We've been getting some emails and some YouTube comments from Conservatives that are pissed that the Liberals are talking about cutting GST on new home purchases. They're saying that was a stealing all of our ideas. And Carney is kind of sort of stealing a few of the Conservative ideas. Do you see it as him stealing their thunder, or is it a lack of creativity on policy? Right move or wrong move for the Carney Liberals? Or do you even agree with the premise in the first place?
I do sort of agree with the premise, which is that, you see the sort of taking that GST idea from the Conservatives, but at the same time also sharing the same idea as the NDP when it comes to building homes and expanding access to housing using federal land. And so they, the Conservatives and the NDP go very much in their directions with it, but the Carney Liberals seem to be saying like, we can undermine your support by somehow taking a copy and paste version of your ideas and making it a much more capital L liberal idea by kind of limiting its scope. And so it's interesting that, Mark Carney is not articulating like a big L, everybody in the tent liberal vision of Canada. He's saying all these ideas are good. Let's use all of them. And I think that's part of his appeal. We're seeing him it's at minimum 6 points ahead in the polls of Pierre. And part of that is that like their policy platform contains a lot of everybody's ideas.
I mean, in theory, and actually probably in practice, that's what most people would want to see from their politicians. It's hard to imagine a politician saying about their rival, their political opponent, they had a really good idea on something and we're going to adopt that idea. It might not be framed like that, but maybe if we could see more of that in politics, it would actually be a good thing.
I mean, that's the interesting thing about, elections, which is that there's tensions that are being fought. But when it comes to these like specific policy debates, when they're in parliament, when they're in committee, they are pretty much in lockstep. They talk to the experts and the experts largely agree and inform them very well. And so it's about whether or not they can kind of spin up the partisan hype around some of these ideas. But some of these ideas are the things that people are going to the polls for. So it's not just about the partisanship, but it is about the specific policy ideas and how they're going to improve people's lives. I find it fascinating that there's just, kind of a sense of agreement between the two parties at the top and the NDP as well about what to do about housing, and that it's such a critical issue. In this moment where there's such kind of broad global economic turmoil, people are looking for specific and local policy solutions. And that's fascinating.
We're talking to Vicky Mochama. She's the host of the new and popular already Canadian political podcast Party All the Time. You can find her podcast on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find her episodes on YouTube on the Real Talk channel. More with Vicky live from Milan in just a second. This Easter, Catering by Friesen Brothers is making dinner easy with a fully prepared Easter dinner box for just $79.99. You get turkey, both dark and white meat, roasted baby potatoes, creamy dill carrots. Those are my absolute favorite. They'll blow your mind. Tray buns, cranberry sauce, gravy, sour cream, and bacon bits. Real ones, ready to heat and serve. It feeds 4, and it's perfect for spending more time with loved ones and less time in the kitchen. Just pre-order and pick up from your local Friesen Brothers stores. You can find all details at cateringbyfriesen.com/Easter dinner. Now, I know everybody's talking about the markets right now. On April 3rd, we welcomed Edmonton Chamber of Commerce President and CEO Doug Griffiths to the show. You can check out that interview on our YouTube archive or, of course, wherever you get your podcasts. Doug and his team at the Chamber advocating for businesses all across the Metro Edmonton region. You can learn more about the benefits of membership by checking out edmontonchamber.com. And while you're there on their website, they've always got something going on in that community calendar, including coming up through the month of April, the next Coffee with the Chamber event. Make sure you mark your calendar for April 25th. Just one of the benefits of membership. You can learn more at edmontonchamber.com. We're so proud to be celebrating the accomplishments of our friends at UCAN Youth Services, and included in that team, I'm talking about the young people aged 18 to 25 that are taking part in that Road to Work program. This is a fantastic collaboration between UCAN Youth Services and companies in the construction, road building, and traffic safety industries. This is for young adults who, once they apply successfully, will start earning a $15 an hour wage right out of the gates. And they'll learn how to run tools and how to operate a saw and a drill and all the basic stuff you need to enter to kickstart your career, specifically in the construction, roadwork, and traffic safety sectors. You earn while you learn. And all of this made possible due to the support of the amazing industry partners that UCAN Youth Services is collaborating with every single week. If you can think of a young person in your life that, well, this sounds like we're describing exactly them, they've got so much potential, but they just need an opportunity, make sure you refer them to the Road to Work program. You can learn more about it by checking out their website, ucan.ca. And before we get back to Vicky Mochama, a quick note from our friends at Complete Care Restoration. This is the time of year where a lot of people are going to experience things like sewer backups, or maybe your home reno project will reveal something unexpected like black mold or even asbestos. Their team's got more than 25 years of experience restoring properties and rebuilding peace of mind. If disaster strikes, if your home or business is impacted by a flood or smoke damage or wildfire, whatever it is, don't wait. Get in touch with Complete Care Restoration today. You can find them via the sponsors tab on our website at ryanjesperson.com.
I have a bit of a harsher view of Poilievre's policies when it comes to housing. I don't think they're going to do anything to support renters. There was this, before that housing hell video, there was another video that Poilievre put out in the summer of 2023 that I found very revealing. You know, part of his blitz of visits to shop floors around the country, and he's in this construction shop in Alberta, and a guy in a high vis like working shirt raises his hand and says, "Look, my rent doubled from $750 to $1,300 this year." Like, that's basically one whole paycheck of mine. What about putting something in for landlords so that they can't jack up the rent that much? And Poilievre, he goes on this like long rambling speech about how, it's like because the Liberals are spending too much, or there's too much bureaucracy and there's not enough competition and there's not enough places to put people. And that to me was fascinating, because there's a very simple answer that he could have given, which is rent control. And in Alberta, there's no rent control. So people can jack up the rent as much as they want. Federal governments in the past have imposed rent freezes. In fact, the great boogeyman of Alberta and Poilievre, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, Justin's dad, put in a rent freeze in the 70s for several years, had a trickle-down effect towards having rent control in many other provinces afterward. The people that Poilievre is looking out to support are, again, the corporate developers and landlords in this country. In my book, I report on this fundraising event that was held for Poilievre by the country's richest corporate landlord, Peter Gilgan, multi-billionaire, holds a party for Poilievre and 100 of his high earner friends in the 44th floor of the Four Seasons Hotel in Toronto. You know, the champagne's flowing. And the reason people like this are supporting and fundraising for Poilievre is that he's going to his policies would lead to an absolute bonanza of profits for these guys. Those zoning changes that they want the municipalities to make, there are some problems with them in terms of limiting density. But if you're looking at the kind of changes that would happen, they would immediately have huge profitable impacts for these landowners.
Interesting take from Martin Lukács, author of the Pierre Poilievre Project, on the newest episode of Party All the Time with Vicky Mochama. Of course, Martin joined by Jen St. Denis and Andrew Wareham. Vicky on a fantastic episode. I encourage everybody to check it out. And you got another one coming this Friday. I think you deserve some credit for really putting yourself out there. Public-facing people don't always do this, but you start your episode by putting your own numbers through a mortgage calculator and telling everybody about the result. Did you feel like you were doing that on behalf of millions of Canadians?
I wasn't doing it on behalf of anybody. I just kind of wanted to know for my own record. Recording it was a bit of I must be some sort of masochist because I love suffering. So I was thinking through all the what are my numbers? What does my annual salary looks like? I'm a freelancer, so it veers sometimes, but I can come up with a decent number. And what kind of down payment could I cobble together if I just kept eating only, packets of noodles? And when I put in the numbers that I had, they're relatively realistic to my real life. It gave me a mortgage it's not going to get me a house in Toronto. Maybe it's going to get me a parking lot. I looked this up on realtor.ca. I can probably get a parking lot in Toronto, but a house,
a parking, you can get a parking space. You can't get.
Oh yeah, not a parking
space.
lot. Oh my god, if I could get a parking lot, I would be king.
I don't know why I'm laughing. It's not funny.
You have to laugh because otherwise it makes you feel horrible, which I think a lot of people do feel when it comes to their housing situations and what they can do. They're like me, maybe they make a decent amount of money. They work hard. They have a little bit of chunk of change set aside for something like buying a house or making sure they can rent something for them and their family. And it just doesn't get you what it could. The money isn't going very far. Now, I could get a decent spot if I moved further out. I talk in the podcast about moving potentially to Lethbridge, Alberta, which is a cute town. No disrespect, no shade to Lethbridge, Alberta.
Yeah, great city.
Yeah, I'm for and in favor, but it's not where my economic opportunities lie. It's not where my community is. And I think we're, as people, you just want to be where you are supported, where you can feel whole, and where you can do the kind of work and living that you set out to do. And so that's kind of what I wanted to show, is like, it's not all glamour here in podcast land. And even when you make a decent amount of money, it doesn't get you what you need.
And like I said, I mean, I think that you're the perspective you're representing, and the one that you dig into in your episode, and I commend you for it, is one that so many people feel. This isn't like, these aren't like lazy, complacent people that like want everything handed to them. They want the government, they want like a, guaranteed basic income. They don't have to work. They're not that's not who we're talking about. And that's also not taking away from people that do need supports, by the way. I'm just saying there's a lot of people that are busting their asses day in, day out, working 2 jobs, working 3 jobs, cutting corners on their own personal stuff, right? Getting another summer out of the shoes they wore last summer or whatever it is, and still not getting ahead. And I think that's a big thing that Pierre Poilievre tapped into when he won the Conservative leadership and sold, 300,000 memberships and raised a bunch of money, because he was tapping into that feeling of, I don't think it's too, I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that sense of despair. And I think you describe it well as well, when people feel like they're doing everything that they can control and they still can't get ahead.
And it also, Pierre Poilievre, being a bit of a populist, is talking about like that sense of fear and frustration and stuckness. When he talks, he got dragged for it. And then the episode, Jen St. Denis also kind of drags him for making the comment about the sort of, family in their, 2 people in their 30s wanting to start a family and having, the biological clock ticking away. And you might think that comment is an ick, but it also reflects a deep reality for a lot of people. Like, you want to make something happen, and you're in a country that's relatively wealthy, relatively safe. And I'm very cognizant of the ups and downs that are happening in the global market. But, Canada has a certain amount of stability and is trying to preserve that. And the challenges people, and especially as you go, down the age ladder, are facing when it comes to making those next steps that kind of make people feel like, okay, yes, I'm doing something, I'm progressing in this life. Housing is just such a big part of that, whether you rent, whether you buy, whether you're dealing with homelessness, or whether you're even, I definitely know people who have multiple properties who are like, oh, I can't even afford to be like a decent landlord anymore. I have to jack up rents. And so everyone's kind of in a horrific position. And the question is, who in this federal election is selling people an idea and a vision that they want to buy?
Yeah, no, that's really well said. I wanted to pick your brain on this. And by the way, before we let you go, because you're obviously in one of the world's great cities right now, and I'm sure you have some exploring that needs to be done, but I'm sure you saw this report, Justine Hunter, on behalf of the Globe and Mail, millions of Canadians will receive payments for carbon price just days before the federal election, despite the levy's cancellation. So here's the numbers. Despite the fact that Mark Carney's kind of sworn this off, the consumer carbon tax, and there's different theories on whether or not it'll come back and how legitimate all of this is, but still about 13 million people, so long as they filed their return with Revenue Canada by April 2nd, will receive a total of $4 billion in rebates. Those that haven't filed their taxes yet will receive them after the federal election. But critics are saying, this reeks of political opportunism. It's pretty tough to argue that, to be honest with you, with hundreds of dollars landing in a whole bunch of people's bank accounts from a liberal government right before people go vote for either another liberal government or a conservative government. Does this stink to you? Should Mark Carney have stepped in? What do you make of this story?
I think the criticism's a fair one, right? Which is that anytime you have an incumbent government using people's cash to sort of, I'm not comfortable saying buying their vote, but really incentivizing people's kind of goodwill towards the governing party, that's a deeply kind of troubling space and uncomfortable one to be in. Like, I am gonna use that check to buy a bottle of Prosecco very shortly, but I understand the concern about, it's politically very icky and ethically kind of suspect, but these checks are going to hit people's bank accounts in a kind of fortuitous way for the Liberals, but whether it generates votes for them remains to be seen, because I think it's still a pretty decently close race, even with the Liberals ahead. I think a lot could happen in the next couple of weeks that will really change that balance for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm not trying to just ride the fence this entire time, but I honestly feel like regardless of what the polls have said, regardless of what they said 18 months ago, regardless of what they say 18 hours ago, you could tell me that Mark Carney won, and I wouldn't be surprised. You could tell me Pierre Poilievre won, and I wouldn't be surprised. It feels like that kind of an election. We have fewer than 3 weeks to go till April 28th, till Election Day. In this week, over the course of the next week, and obviously you'll take it all on when your next episode drops coming up on Friday, the 11th of April. But what's one thing that you're keeping a really keen eye on?
I mean, like everybody else, I'm keeping an eye on the markets and what they do a lot of it's touching kind of global politics. Here, I was up early enough to watch the Asian markets open. I got to see Europe open, and then I watched it hit North America. And the TSX the Toronto Stock Exchange is one of the largest stock exchanges in the world. These things are going to hit us. It feels like macroeconomic issues, but tying it back to housing, these are sort of the big changes that will affect whether or not we can afford to build housing, whether we can pay the labor that does that, whether people can afford to pay the kind of cash you have to put together in our country to buy a house. This is going to be a massive shift in how people approach their day-to-day. And so I'm just keeping an eye on the markets. I feel bad for every businessman at an airport. I've been looking at their phone trying to understand what's going on because it doesn't look good. Everyone's checking their stock indices, and we shall see how that affects, your ability to go to the store and buy an apple.
For a lot of people, that's like a very real concern right now. Shout out to our friends even locally here at Edmonton's Food Bank, talking to them just the other day, like use is up. And on one hand, you're like, I'm grateful that the resource is there and they're funded enough from donors and sponsors that are stepping up in times of need like this. But it's always a gut punch to hear that more and more people are accessing those food banks because of the very real nature of where the economy is at right now. Not just for the nation, not just for the global economy and the markets, but for everyday folks. Vicky, you're doing an unbelievable job with Party All the Time. Next episode dropping April 11th. People can find it wherever they get their podcasts and watch your episodes as well on the Real Talk YouTube channel. Thanks for doing this from Milan. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah, nice chatting.
All right, we're going to get to some of your comments in the live chat here, and good for Vicky, who says she's going to use some of her check to go pick up some Prosecco right now as she's over in Italy. It kind of sets the table, doesn't it, for us to talk Edmonton Opera for a second? We need more Prosecco in our lives, John. We need more Prosecco in our lives.
I don't disagree.
All right. Our friends at Edmonton Opera announcing their 2025-26 season. And we want to make sure that this is all over your radar because these performances will sell out. You can inspire the next generation of opera lovers by attending or, of course, by subscribing to the full season. You can find out all the details at edmontonopera.com. Some legacies passed down and others, well, they must be claimed. And so the 2025 season into 2026, Edmonton Opera will be exploring what it means to inherit, build, and redefine a legacy through a bold lineup of performances and very special events, opening with Bravi, Opera's greatest hits in partnership with the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra at the Winspear Center, October 9th and 11th. And then in February, audiences will witness the world premiere of Indians on Vacation. This is a poignant and comedic new opera based on Thomas King's novel of the same name. This runs through the beginning of February at the Northern Alberta Jubilee Auditorium on the 5th, 6th, and 7th. Just 3 nights to check that out. And finally, the season will conclude with the 3rd chapter of Wagner's legendary Ring Cycle, an epic tale of heroism and fate performed, that's Siegfried, at the McLab Theatre at the Citadel. I love that place. At the end of May, the 25th, 27th, 29th, and 31st, you can subscribe now or build your season, specifically the performances you'd love to see, by checking out edmontonopera.com today. And I see your comments, Real Talkers, in our live chats about the economy and about which political parties you feel are, well, reflecting your concerns right now. For a lot of you, that may be a question of employment and opportunity. And it's a real honor for us to be able to, on behalf of our friends at Solar by Kubi, to let you know about some job postings that are open right now. These are my favorite promotional mentions, John, because you never know when somebody's listening to the podcast or watching this on YouTube, they see something that may quite literally change the course of their career. They're looking for a ticketed journey person to join their team in Lethbridge. In Kamloops, they're looking for a direct solar sales expert, as well as one in Kelowna who would be working remotely. How cool would that be to be working remotely in Kelowna?
I was there.
Maybe we need to figure that out. Yeah, you were there. You moved from there to here to join us. I'm so sorry to pull you away from Kelowna. We were smart. We did it in February.
I love Alberta, baby.
They were looking for a solar PV expert in Calgary, also looking for an apprentice electrician in Calgary. And then a whole bunch of other opportunities. I mean, in Edmonton, a direct solar sales expert. You get the idea here. A lead structural engineer down in Calgary. You can find out more about each of the job postings. And, of course, submit your application online. Check out kubi.ca. That's where you can also get a free solar quote. Pretty soon, like next couple of weeks, they're going to be sending their teams up on roofs if they're not already, as soon as it's safe. And as long as you've paid your deposit, by the 20th of June, you qualify to win $5,000 off your solar install. That's right. Kubi's been around for 10 years already. Hard to believe. And so to celebrate, they're giving away $10,000 to 2 customers, $5,000 each off your installation. You can learn more about how to qualify. Those 2 names will be drawn live on the 20th of June at their summer solstice party. Find all the details. Get your free solar quote today by visiting kubi.ca. I see we have some people asking for a little more chat moderation here. Ladies and gentlemen, my friends, we have the golden rule in place where we ask you to please treat one another as you would wish to be treated yourself. And I'm not going to turn into like the Sunday school teacher here and implore each of you to be nice, but some of you are coming in there pushing buttons, trying to get a rise out of each other, and while it's wildly entertaining for us, we would rather see everybody. You know, we've got the lefties in there, we got the righties in there, we got a whole bunch of centrists in there, I'm sure, and all of your takes are welcome as long as you're not calling each other libtards and assholes. How's that? Can we all agree on that?
I actually let the libtard stuff go. It's just the personal insults, and obviously racism, sexism, homophobia, that kind of stuff. But everything else can fly. You can swear, you can do whatever you want. Just debate with respect. Do you want to refer to this poll?
Well, I'm getting a bit of a kick out of one of the trends I'm seeing in the chat today, which is just funny. And I want to name all of you by name because I appreciate you guys. But we've got some conservatives, some ardent conservatives in the chat that are complaining. They're complaining that there's too many liberals. There's too many liberal voices on the show. I think these are the same people that were telling Ken Bosencool that he wasn't conservative enough. Ken, the co-author of the Firewall Letter with Ted Morton and Tom Flanagan and Stephen Harper, talking about Alberta as an entity with a firewall around it, essentially how a stronger Alberta could exist within a stronger Canada. And Ken got a real kick out of some of you letting him know that he's not conservative enough. The former chief of staff to Premier Christy Clark, former Stephen Harper advisor, former Preston Manning advisor. But to Plain Power and Vamp Fashions and Seventh Pilot and East Coast Stoner and Tommy Temper and Blah Sheep and Greg Messner and everybody else that we see in there. I'm writing down your names here as I'm chuckling that you're talking about how the liberal tone of all this, as all of you are sharing your conservative perspectives. I understand, and I won't explain this every single time, but I was laughing at it as I was talking to Vicky, and I just wanted to point out that I know that some people aren't used to a talk show that talks to conservatives and talks to liberals, that talks to NDP politicians, that sometimes even talks to the Greens, you know, but we in all seriousness, do endeavor to seek to understand why people believe what they believe and exactly sort of how that translates into everyday life. And so if you're looking to enrich your perspective by understanding where other people are coming from, and some days it's going to be somebody maybe on the left, and some days it's going to be somebody maybe on the right, and then other days it might be somebody that kind of keeps you guessing and you can't quite pin them down. Those are my favorites. The ones that you can't just pigeonhole. If that's what you're keen about, then this is the show for you. And if you're looking for an echo chamber with recycled talking points that only presents one political perspective and shuts out all the rest, then maybe this show isn't for you. But we extend a very warm welcome to everybody, or at least to most folks. Johnny, I saw that some folks were in the chat asking about being blocked, and we wanted to
No,
let people know our
nobody's ever
policy
blocked.
on this, because I do think it's important to have it on the record. Unless what you're saying is absolutely deplorable and completely, without a doubt, unacceptable, we don't block people.
Well, that hasn't happened since we unblocked everyone at the start of the year. We'll just let you behind the window. And so we gave everyone a chance again. And it's kind of, save for some spam bots and porn and stuff that comes in here. They're blocked forever.
Thanks. I thought you were going to say thanks for that. Yeah.
Well, I did follow the links, but but yeah, nobody ever gets blocked. You just get a timeout. It's like a little sit in the corner with the dunce cap on, right?
Yeah, fair
But
enough.
I think most people have got it by now. You just don't insult people. It's fun. You get outside of that, say whatever you want.
Yeah, Kenzie says, Ryan, we are muted. No, you're not, Kenzie, because I can read your comment. Joy is wondering, Joy Unleashed, which might be the best handle of anybody in the chat. Nah, Dubious might be the best, but Joy,
I like Dubious.
Joy Unleashed. It took me
We should do an
2
awards
years.
show.
It took me 2 years to figure out that it wasn't Dubious.
You should do a chat awards show.
Joy Unleashed wondering, am I muted? No, you're not. You're not. We all appreciate you. Even Greg, who's trying to pick a fight with me. Greg, I know everybody's tougher behind their computer.
And if
everybody's tougher.
If you want an echo chamber, create one yourself. You can mute whoever you want in your chat. You can take them out and not see them at all. That's up to you.
Cactus Sheriff wants us to free the porn. Whatever happened to our plan? We were going to do a porn roundtable. And in all seriousness,
we still have to.
I'm not saying just get like 3 adult film stars.
No, but we should have sex worker advocates and stuff.
Let's talk about porn. Is it, are there positives to porn? What are the inherent negatives to porn? And is porn addiction a real thing? I mean, the answer is yes.
The positives are all fleeting. They're instantaneous.
But you never know. I mean, for some people, maybe we shouldn't get into this right now.
No.
But some folks have an interesting relationship with porn. I bet you could find some people that would argue that porn saved their relationship. I bet you could find more people that would argue that it destroyed their relationship. But that is something I remember about a year ago. We promised this audience we would do a roundtable on it. We should get around to it. I wanted to read some of your comments that as we were talking to Vicky. I noticed some of these. Kathy, and how about that comment as well from Martin Lukash, who talked about he's on Vicky's most recent episode, and of course you can find that if you're looking for it. You can find Party All the Time anywhere you get your podcast, but you can also find the video episodes.
Oh yeah.
We're partnering with her through this election campaign, and we wanted to make sure that we could put her show in front of an existing audience. So if you're on the Real Talk YouTube channel, thanks to everybody that subscribes to that, you'll find Party All the Time, Vicky's video episodes right there. Just scroll down and you'll find it's got its own chapter section there, so you can watch, including the most recent episode. That's Jen St. Denis you see there on the screen. But Martin making an interesting point, talking about renters and saying, there's not a lot that you hear. Maybe the NDP from time to time more than anybody else, but there's a lot of talk about housing starts, would-be or first-time home buyers, existing home buyers. You don't hear a lot about renters.
Mm-hmm.
And if you looked at the segment of the population that rents, it's significant. And so I thought that he made a good point on that. But Kathy pointing out in our live chat, she says there's an apartment building in the capital city in Edmonton that was in the news, says it was bought and the new owner tripled the rent on them. I'll reference Karen Bartko's reporting with Global News. Check this out. This is renters there calling it absolutely insane. Johnny, this is a 110-year-old building. This is called the Animo Mansion, and it's residents in that. It's a designated historic resource, or at least it qualifies as one based on its age. But residents in that apartment building have been paying rent around $880. A renter talking to Global News, a guy by the name of Joseph Rockwood. He's been living in one of those suites. There's 26 suites in the building, paying $880 a month, and they've just been notified as the building sold for what they're estimating. It was listed for sale last year for $3.5 million. So who knows what it sold for, but probably right around that-ish, let's say between $3 and $4 million. Their rent has been cranked up from $880 a month to more than $2,600 a month. So the rent has more than tripled, which you can imagine for anybody, no matter how much you make, a rent increase of basically like $1,700+ would be a real kick in the teeth for anybody. Now, the people that are going to be displaced out of this building are saying, well, obviously the new owner, and the owner's upfront about this part, at least, so they've declined interviews, at least at the point that this was published with Global News. They've not gone on the record, but they've indicated that they've got some serious renovations to do to the building. It's in a prime location for anybody that knows where Edmonton's at. It's basically along that Victoria Promenade that overlooks like the Victoria Golf Course, and then it looks south over the river to the University of Alberta. It's pretty prime location, and some of the condos that are also there on Victoria Promenade, for anybody not in Edmonton, to let you know, some of those beautiful condo buildings, like the big concrete installations, tons of glass, they're like $2, $3, $4 million a pop. So this historic resource, this historic building, this red brick building is right there in that same spot. So it's right on prime real estate. So whoever bought it, this group that bought it, say that they're going to dump a bunch of dough into it. They're going to renovate it and presumably rent it out at that higher rate. It probably, I would imagine, between $2,500 and $3,000 a month. So they're saying the new owners of the property, the developer says, oh no, we don't want anybody to leave. We hope everybody can stay. The rent increase is just due to the fact that the building requires some extensive renovations.
Okay.
A friend of mine used to live there. I can attest to the fact that the building does require significant renovations. There's issues with like the radiators and how the heat works. They've had mice in the building. 110 years old, obviously. There are some issues there. But a rent increase from $880 to $2,600 a month, obviously, for the most part, is going to clean that building out. I can't imagine that there's a lot of people that are going to stay through that, let alone stay through all the construction that's going to happen. So a rent-controlled scenario would probably, or would for sure, prevent something like that. So what is the provincial government saying about it? Well, I would say that they're taking the position that I think a lot of Albertans would take, at least those that own the properties. The Ministry of Seniors, Community and Social Services says, quote, Alberta will not go down the disastrous road of rent control, pointing out that Alberta has tried it in the past and found that it discouraged new development. In other words, investors don't want to put their money somewhere where they can't allow the market to dictate the rates of what they're charging for rent. I shared with Vicky, my brother and sister-in-law's scenario. I don't know that
they're locked in.
I don't know that
that's pretty good for them.
It is good for them, and I don't know that they want me, proclaiming and presenting their personal financial situation. But basically, a rent control scenario in Vancouver has been absolutely necessary, in particular, I think, because of so much foreign ownership and some of the other factors. Vancouver and Toronto in particular have had to do what they can to keep housing under control, because there are people, and I don't even know how they do it, but there are people that are working like regular jobs in Vancouver, people that are, I don't know, let's say they're making between $60,000 and $120,000 a year. I don't know how the hell they're paying to live out there. I don't know how they're affording $3,500 a month, $4,000 a month in rent. How on earth did they do it?
I still have friends who, and it's amazing that their rent, your brother's rent, has kind of stayed where it is. Because I have friends in Vancouver, because I used to live there. I lived there for 7 years, whose rent has just gone up and up and up and doubled and tripled, and it's insane. I feel grateful that when I lived in Vancouver, I lived a block off Granville Street, and it was for I want to say like $14.95.
What year would that have been?
This would have been 2001, but I lived off Granville Street from 2004 to 2008 when I moved here to Edmonton. And I feel grateful that I was in the heart of the city for under $2,000. That's unheard of now.
Oh, yeah. You wouldn't find that anywhere. I don't actually even think that you could find that in, like, Langley.
No way.
You know what I mean?
Any of the outskirts, no.
Yeah, I mean, Chilliwack, like, maybe. No disrespect to Chilliwack, but, yeah, I can't imagine. Les, we see you in the Super Chat. $10, buddy. Thanks. You don't have to do that. He said, we sure appreciate it. He says, have you seen that the Alberta Accessibility Report has not been made public?
Oh, yeah.
Says the Premier's office in Medicine Hat does not even have a handicap door. That from Les. Appreciate you putting that on our radar. I want to let you know, actually, I feel like I've said on the show several times in the last week, we don't usually do this, and then I keep doing it, letting you know behind the curtain about interviews and segments we're working on and producing behind the scenes. But we have been chatting with our pal Zachary Weeks, who's was recently won an Edifier Award in Edify Magazine for his work as an advocate for people with disabilities, and just doing an amazing job. Also wanted to put this story on your radar. I know that many of you are interested in this story. United Nurses of Alberta, within the last week, week, receiving a 20% wage increase in a new 4-year agreement. We heard that from Dave Cornwallier, of course, you know, the magic behind Dave Berta, who also does work with the United Nurses of Alberta. But hoping this deal will make Alberta's nurses the highest paid nurses in the country.
Good.
And advocates for that, and of course, UNA spokespersons are saying that this will bring some stability, they hope, this agreement, this 4-year agreement, which is obviously good news for nurses and good news for Albertans as they ratified their collective agreement. The UNA representing more than 35,000 registered nurses, psychiatric nurses, and allied health workers across the province, voting taking place into late last week. So this is good news, not just for the nurses that are working now, but also you talk about recruiting efforts, this idea around Alberta's calling. Now, this all correlates as well back to the conversation we've been having today about affordability and housing, right? Yeah. Because the more people that are moving here, the more housing you're going to need, and the less housing that you have, the higher the prices are going to go. That's how supply and demand works,
and
right?
Man, do we need them, Ryan. Bring in more nurses. Bring in more doctors. We need more, family physicians. We need all of that. I mean, we both know, both of us just trying to find a new family doctor in the last year and a half. It's I'm not going to say next to impossible, but it takes a good 2 weeks just to get in to see someone. And then you've got to, that whole feeling out process. Do I feel comfortable with this person? Do I trust, the advice they're giving me? And then after that, you've probably got to see 2 or 3 people till you settle on one. And that's just, it's such an exhausting process here in this province. I don't know. I long for the days back in the day where you just kind of inherited your family's doctor and they were just always your guy or girl, right?
Medicine has changed so much and I mean that we've talked to Dr. Paul Parks many times about this and the new leadership at the Alberta Medical Association, but the incentive just isn't there for family doctors to practice like they used to. And that's just been a fact. So Dubious says, this is great news, says hopefully we can attract some nurses back to the province, of course. Others are saying, this is Super Chat Ken says the number of registered nurses, RNs in Alberta has been going down per capita every year between 2019 and 2023, says maybe more money, but still overworked. Cactus Sheriff says, good for the nurses union. I want our medical staff to be the highest paid in Canada.
Agree.
Others of you are saying, well, that's great for the nurses. Now do it for the teachers. Tracy says the teachers' offer is dismal.
Yeah, I guarantee whatever those nurses here in Alberta that are making the most in the country now is, I still would look at the number and be like, not enough. Not enough. You couldn't pay me enough to be a nurse and to deal with all that stress every day, let alone, well, I guess a teacher would be in there, but probably just below. But
it's a special calling.
It is so many different jobs. You are a Swiss Army knife. You're not just a caretaker and a babysitter and a health and wellness advisor and all these things. You're a million different things, and every day you're walking into something where you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, on any day we come to work and we generally know what the lay of the land is for the day. Yeah. For a nurse, for a teacher, for a doctor, for an emergency room attendant, it's question marks.
Yeah. Some of you are saying teachers, this is Tracy again, teachers haven't had a cost of living increase in over 10 years. She says it's like a wage decrease every year instead, inflation factoring into that, of course. Let us know. I mean, I'd most want to hear from the teachers here. Let us know if you are a teacher. I don't know if you are, Tracy, or not, but let us know what your reality is like, or maybe if you're working in a profession or an industry that is not getting a lot of attention right now, we'd love to hear from you. I'm excited to let you know if you work in ag, or if you eat. Anybody that eats. Don't miss our Thursday episode that's coming up. That'll be watch me do this, John. That'll be the 10th of April.
For our eaters.
Yeah, that'll be for anybody that eats. We encourage you to join us on Thursday's episode of Real Talk, where Sean Haney is going to join us. The Sirius XM radio personality is the host of Real Agriculture, and Sean's going to get into the nitty-gritty on all of the ag angles, because we want you to be the smartest in the room every single time. So make sure you check that out. More comments here on the live chat. LT, powered by Park Power, says the easiest way to have affordable housing is to lower immigration significantly. Says if you can't control the supply side, you got to control the demand side. What is Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre's policy on immigration?
Haven't heard a lot of that.
I would say that immigration is probably the most under-discussed This is going to be a weird comment, so try to stick with me through it. It is the most under-discussed issue of great importance. You know what I'm saying?
Currently, yeah.
Of Canadians' top concerns. If you stopped Canadians on the street and said, what is your top 5, or what are your top, if you really had them sit there for a second and said, what are your top 10 election issues for sure, I bet immigration would pop up on probably 75% of people's radar.
And why aren't we talking about it? I think people on either side of the aisle know that we need correct immigration. Like, we need people coming here. We need growth to the economy. We also need skilled workers coming here if we're going to build homes, and people are going to attend to all these jobs that are going to pop up because of more people coming to the country. But yeah, I feel like no one's talking about it, Ryan.
Yeah, so I appreciate that comment from LT, and maybe that's something that we'll put in front of our panelists. Of course, we're running through the week, as you know. Just a reminder, every Tuesday, Vicky Mochama joins us. Every Wednesday, we're talking to one of the correspondents from Politico, part of our election partnership with them. Nick Taylor-Vasey is in Alberta. He's our Ottawa bureau chief. He'll be joining us live in studio on our next episode. And then on Fridays, the team from Meredith Bosencool and Phillips joins us for kind of like that cross the aisle look. So you'll get kind of a progressive and a more ardent conservative view on the election campaign every week all the way through. Gilles is watching us, says there's almost no difference between liberal and conservative economic policies. Says really the choice between these two parties is social policy. Kind of interesting. I love this. Cactus Sheriff chimed in when I was talking to Vicky, and this idea that Mark Carney is essentially stealing Pierre Poilievre's ideas. And I said, I'd like to see more of that in politics.
I agree.
I'd
I
like
thought
to
that
see
was great.
Attribution. I would love for, this will never happen, but I would love for a politician to say, you know what? Like, can you imagine if Mark Carney said, you know what? Mr. Poilievre actually had a great idea.
I know.
And we like the idea of slashing GST on new home purchases, and we're going to do that.
Well, they kind of have been doing that with their 1.3, 1.1, going back and forth.
But they never want to give credit.
No.
But Cactus Sheriff says, yeah, God forbid a good idea be adopted for the benefit of citizens, regardless of where it came from. I think it would, and I know it makes me sound a little naive, but I would love to see politicians give each other credit when there's an actual good idea.
Wouldn't that be great to see someone humbly step up to a podium and say, hey, listen, we didn't think of this, but we think their team did a great job on this, so we're going to include it in our plan too, because we just think it's a bonus. Yeah. Why not?
Cactus Sheriff follows up, says, Jespo, threats to sovereignty from our closest neighbor tend to overshadow immigration. Sure, but buddy, keep in mind, all the shit that's happening down south factors into immigration, right? So it's all part of the same pie. We just want to hear more about it. When's the last time you heard any of the party leaders even touch on it, right? Joy Unleashed says, yay for corporatocracy, in all caps. I suspect that may be tongue-in-cheek. Matthew watching us, thanks for your membership, Matthew. He says, I'm on board with the national developer, more the Carney plan. Says it shouldn't be a for-profit business opportunity for developer friends of Pierre Poilievre and his cronies. I mean, I don't know. I do think that it should be a for-profit opportunity for any developer you're trying to recruit. Otherwise, why would they do it? And if you're not going to tap the developers on the shoulder, then how on earth are you going to unfurl the most ambitious housing development from coast to coast in Canadian history? I don't know. If you have another idea and you think I'm out to lunch on that, I would love to have you argue it out in an email, and I will read it from start to finish. I promise. Plain Power 2, talking about the Liberal plan, says this used to be common before World War I, and in the 1970s, Denis, not wrong, says affordable housing will also reduce the value of existing homes. See, everybody sees this from where they're at, right? If you're of retirement age, if you're right at that stage where you've seen your home, you know, the bungalow that you bought in the 1960s for like $64,000, that's now worth like $895,000, and that's your entire retirement, and that's maybe how you're going to help your grandchild pay for their university, or that's how you're going to buy that Airstream trailer that you've always wanted forever and ever, then you're going to feel differently than somebody who's like 26 and wants to have a family and would love to have a backyard for their dog and has, you know, their own realities. Everybody's going to feel differently about it. But Denis, you're not wrong in pointing it out, right? The more housing stock, then the less heated the market. And if you're trying to get into the market, that's a great thing. And if you're trying to pull out of the market, then it's probably not the best. It just goes to show that we've got different perspectives checking in on this show, and we've got different perspectives guesting on this show every single week, and that's the promise that we will keep to you, Real Talkers. We sure appreciate it. As mentioned, coming up on our next episode, that's going to be, watch this, John, that'll be the 9th of April. That'll be Wednesday. Nick Taylor-Vasey will join us live in studio. We're also going to have a brand new look at some really cool stuff happening in Jasper, courtesy of our friends at Tourism Jasper. Thursday, Sean Haney for Real Agriculture. If you have an ag question or if you're an ag producer with something you'd like us to talk about, you know where to find us. That's talk@ryanjesperson.com. We'll see you again soon.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.